There was a sound, a distant howl echoing through the forest, unlike anything Laura had ever heard before. It wasn't the cry of any animal she knew. Deep, haunting, it resonated like it came from another world. Laura told herself to stay calm, but her heart raced, pounding against her chest as if it wanted to escape. She could feel an unsettling chill running down her spine, an instinct that whispered, "You shouldn't be here." It all started as a simple dare. Her friends, Sam and Jenny, thought it would be fun to spend the weekend camping near Wolf's Hollow, a forest infamous for its eerie tales of creatures that lurked in the shadows. People had gone missing here. Some said they were taken by wolves. Others whispered about something worse, creatures that were neither fully human nor fully beast. But being skeptical city kids, they laughed it off. The first day was normal. They set up their tents, shared ghost stories around the campfire, and laughed about how none of them believed in the paranormal. Sam kept insisting, "There's no such thing as werewolves, Laura. Don't be ridiculous." But every crackle in the bushes, every branch that snapped, made Laura feel like they weren't alone. As night fell, the forest changed. The usual sounds of birds and insects went silent, replaced by a creeping stillness that weighed on them like a heavy fog. Laura found herself glancing into the darkness more often, feeling like something or someone was watching. She tried to shake it off, focusing on the fire, its warm glow a fragile shield against the unknown. Then just past midnight, they heard it. The howl, long and mournful, echoed from deep within the forest. Laura froze. The sound was so chilling it felt like it reached straight into her bones. Sam tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably just a wolf or a coyote, but even he looked uneasy. Jenny's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Let's go back inside the tent," Jenny whispered, clutching Laura's arm. But Laura couldn't move. There was something hypnotic about that sound, something that made her feel drawn to it, like it was calling her specifically. The howl sounded again, louder this time, closer. Laura could feel her pulse racing, every instinct screaming at her to run. But where? "Did you hear that?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They all nodded, exchanging nervous glances. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the underbrush. Whoever, or whatever it was coming toward them. The air felt thick, and Laura could swear she saw something moving just beyond the reach of the firelight. A glint of eyes, reflecting back at her. Yellow, piercing, predatory. She whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe we should leave." But it was too late. A shadow moved into view just at the edge of the light. It was massive, standing taller than any human, with a hulking frame covered in matted fur. Laura's breath hitched as she took in the creature's appearance. A grotesque blend of wolf and man, its snout filled with rows of jagged teeth, its eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. Sam tried to grab a stick from the fire, wielding it like a weapon, but the creature didn't flinch. It just stood there, watching them, as if deciding which of them would be first. Laura's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Werewolves weren't real, were they? "Run!" Jenny's scream snapped them out of their trance, and they bolted into the trees, not daring to look back. Laura's legs felt like they were made of lead, each step a struggle as branches whipped against her face. The sound of heavy footsteps chasing them. The creature's growls filled the air, a guttural sound that promised death. They stumbled, disoriented, deeper into the forest. The howl came again, this time from multiple directions. There wasn't just one. They were surrounded. Out of breath and terrified, Laura found herself separated from the others, alone in the dark, with only the faint moonlight filtering through the trees. Her heart pounded so loud, she could barely hear anything else. She pressed herself against a tree, trying to catch her breath, straining her ears for any sign of her friends. But the forest was silent again, an unnatural silence that made her skin crawl. Then she heard a soft rustling, followed by low, menacing growls. She couldn't see them, but she knew they were there, watching her, waiting. Her body trembled with fear, her mind racing with thoughts of what they might do to her. She had to find a way out, but where could she go? Every direction seemed like a dead end, leading her deeper into the heart of their hunting ground. And just as she thought it couldn't get any worse, she felt a cold breath against her neck. What would you do if you were in Laura's shoes? Do you think you could escape? Let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit, like if you're brave enough to keep watching. Laura's scream caught in her throat. She spun around, expecting to come face to face with a snarling beast, but there was nothing there. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She forced herself to take slow, quiet breaths, hoping that if she stayed still, they wouldn't find her. Suddenly, she caught sight of movement to her left. Through the darkness, she saw something glinting, teeth, sharp, and dripping with saliva. She stumbled back, her foot catching on a root, and she fell hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her. The creature moved closer, emerging from the shadows with slow, deliberate steps. Its fur was matted and dark. Its eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Every part of her body was paralyzed with terror. Just as the creature was about to lunge, a piercing light cut through the trees. Headlights. Someone was driving down the old dirt road nearby. The creature flinched, snarling as it backed into the shadows, its glowing eyes never leaving hers. Laura didn't waste a second. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling towards the light, her legs shaky and weak. She broke through the trees and saw a rusty old truck parked on the road. A man stepped out, his face lined and weary, holding a flashlight that barely cut through the foggy night. "Hey," he called, his voice gruff. "What are you doing out here?" "Please, you have to help me," she gasped, clutching her side. "There's something in the woods." The man's face darkened. He looked over her shoulder, scanning the tree line. "Get in, now." Without hesitation, she climbed into the truck, her heart still racing. The man shut the door behind her, glancing nervously at the forest before getting into the driver's seat. He didn't say a word as he started the engine and sped down the dirt road, the tires kicking up dust as they left the dark trees behind. After a few minutes, he finally broke the silence. "You shouldn't be out here at night, especially not near Wolf's Hollow." Laura tried to steady her breathing. What are those things?" The man tightened his grip on the wheel. "Things that don't belong in this world. Creatures cursed by the moon." He glanced at her, his eyes dark and haunted. "People around here call them werewolves, but they're more than that. They're hunters, and once they've got your scent, they don't stop." Laura shivered, feeling the weight of his words. Her thoughts went to Sam and Jenny. "My friends, they're still out there." The man's face hardened. If they're lucky, they found somewhere to hide. If not, he trailed off, his silence more terrifying than any answer he could give. They drove in silence, the trees whizzing past, until they reached the edge of town. The man pulled up to an old gas station, the dim light flickering in the darkness. He cut the engine and turned to her. "Listen, if you're smart, you'll get on the first bus out of here and never look back. Those creatures, once they hunt you, they don't forget." "But I can't just leave my friends." Laura whispered, her voice barely audible. He shook his head. I know you want to save them, but these aren't just animals. They're something far worse. If you go back there, you're as good as dead. Laura stared out the window, her mind racing. She couldn't just abandon Sam and Jenny, but the man's warning echoed in her mind. Those creatures weren't just hunting. They were after her. As she stepped out of the truck, she glanced back at the dark road leading back to the forest, the shadows seeming to move and breathe with a life of their own. If you were Laura, would you go back to save your friends? Or would you run? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Laura stood outside the gas station, torn between her fear and the loyalty she felt toward her friends. Her mind flashed back to the look of terror on Jenny's face, the way Sam tried to act brave, but couldn't hide his shaking hands. Could she really just leave them behind? Every instinct told her to run, to escape while she still had the chance, but something deeper, something stronger, pushed her to go back. The man leaned out of the truck, his face shadowed by the dim light of the gas station. Don't be foolish, kid. They're gone. There's no saving them now. Laura swallowed hard, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. They're my friends. I can't just leave them. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. You don't know what you're dealing with, those things. They play with their prey. They'll keep you alive just long enough to enjoy the fear. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to look back at the dark road leading into the forest. Her hands were trembling, but she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to try. The man sighed, his shoulders slumping. If you're really going back, take this. He handed her a silver pendant on a leather cord. It was small, simple, but it felt heavy in her hand. Silver's the only thing they fear. It might buy you a little time. Laura nodded, slipping the pendant around her neck. Without another word, she turned and ran back down the road, her footsteps echoing in the quiet night. As she approached the edge of the forest, an eerie silence greeted her. The usual sounds of the night were gone. No chirping of crickets, no rustling of leaves, just a suffocating stillness that made every step feel like it echoed in a vast emptiness. She stepped cautiously between the trees, her eyes darting around, every shadow looking like it hid something monstrous. The darkness seemed to press in on her, growing thicker with each step. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to keep moving, calling out softly, "Sam? Jenny?" For a few agonizing moments, there was nothing but silence. Then she heard a faint whimper coming from up ahead. Her pulse quickened. It was Jenny's voice. "Jenny, where are you?" Laura whispered urgently, moving toward the sound. The whimpering grew louder, and she found Jenny huddled behind a tree, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She looked up, relief flooding her eyes as she saw Laura. "Oh my God, Laura, I thought you left me." Jenny's voice trembled as she clung to her. Laura hugged her tightly. "I couldn't leave you. Where's Sam?" Jenny's face fell, and she pointed shakily toward a deeper part of the forest. He ran that way when they came for us." Laura took Jenny's hand, trying to calm her. "We're going to find him, okay? We're not leaving without him." They moved slowly, sticking close together as they ventured deeper into the darkness. The silence was broken only by the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional rustling of leaves. Every sound made them jump. Every shadow seemed to stretch and morph as if it were alive. And then, just as they were about to call out for Sam, they heard it. a low growl that sent chills through their veins. They froze, barely daring to breathe. Slowly, they turned, and there, only a few feet away, was one of the creatures. It was hunched low, its yellow eyes fixed on them, its lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. Laura felt the weight of the silver pendant against her chest, but she had no idea if it would actually protect them. Without thinking, she grabbed Jenny's hand and whispered, "Run." They bolted through the trees, the creature's growls echoing behind them, closer and closer. Laura's lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were about to give out, but she forced herself to keep going, dragging Jenny with her. The forest blurred around them as they ran, branches tearing at their clothes, the ground uneven beneath their feet. Just as Laura thought she couldn't go any further, they burst into a small clearing. And there, on the other side, was Sam. He was leaning against a tree, clutching his side, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Laura! Jenny!" They rushed to him, but before they could say anything, a second growl filled the air. The creature had followed them, and now it was joined by another. Two monstrous figures emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing, teeth bared, moving slowly, almost as if they were savoring the fear radiating from the three friends. Laura held up the silver pendant, hoping it would be enough to keep them at bay. But the creatures didn't stop. They seemed almost amused, inching closer and closer. They were trapped. No way out. What would you do if you were in Laura's place? Would you fight? Or try to escape? And do you believe in the power of silver? Let us know in the comments. The creatures circled them slowly, their yellow eyes glinting with cruel intelligence. Laura felt Jenny's grip tighten on her arm, her friend's hands trembling. Sam looked worse, struggling to stand, his face twisted in pain and fear. Laura took a step back, instinctively putting herself between the creatures and her friends. The pendant felt cold against her skin, and she clutched it, like it was her last lifeline. The creatures stopped, sniffing the air as if they sensed something off about her. They exchanged a look, a strange, knowing glance that chilled her to the core. One of them took a step forward, claws digging into the ground, its growl low and rumbling. It was almost like it was waiting for her to make the first move. "Laura." Sam's voice was barely a whisper. We need to run." Laura shook her head, her gaze never leaving the creatures. Laura took a deep breath, forcing herself to sound braver than she felt. "We have to try. We're not making it out of here unless we do." With shaking hands, she took a branch off the ground, wielding it like a makeshift weapon. She had no idea if it would make any difference, but it was better than doing nothing. "Come on," she shouted, hoping to sound intimidating, though her voice cracked. The creature inched closer, lips curled in a twisted grin, as if mocking her attempt to be brave. Laura's heart was hammering, her body frozen between fear and determination. Suddenly, Jenny screamed, and Laura turned to see one of the creatures had lunged at Sam, its claws ripping through his shirt. Sam gasped in pain, clutching his side as blood began to seep through his fingers. "No!" Laura screamed, her fear exploding into raw desperation. She swung the branch with all her strength, striking the creature in the side. It let out a surprised snarl, stumbling back slightly. The other creature moved toward her, but she held up the pendant, hoping it would keep it at bay. To her shock, the creature hissed and backed away, its gaze fixed on the pendant. Laura didn't know if it was the silver or the belief she held in it, but she knew it was their only chance. "Jenny, help me!" she called, her voice filled with urgency. Jenny hesitated, fear paralyzing her. But seeing Sam bleeding on the ground stirred something in her, and she grabbed another branch, standing next to Laura. The two girls held their ground, the creatures circling, looking for an opening. Laura felt like she was balancing on a knife's edge. One wrong move, and it would all be over. Out of nowhere, a distant howl echoed through the forest. The creatures stopped, their heads snapping in the direction of the sound. Another howl joined the first, then another, closer this time, like an entire pack was approaching. The creatures exchanged a wary look before backing away, slipping back into the shadows. Laura's heart was pounding as she watched them vanish, the weight of what had just happened settling over her. They hadn't won, but for some reason, the creatures had retreated. She turned to Sam, who was pale but alive, breathing heavily as he clutched his side. Laura knelt beside him, helping him to his feet. "Come on, we need to get out of here before they come back." Together they stumbled through the forest, supporting Sam as best as they could. The howls continued, echoing through the trees, like they were being tracked by something even more terrifying than the creatures they'd just faced. They reached the edge of the forest, breaking out into an open field, the moonlight casting eerie shadows over everything. The town lights flickered in the distance, a beacon of safety that seemed so far away. But just as they thought they were safe, Laura heard a rustling behind them. She turned, her blood running cold as she saw a new figure emerge from the trees. This one was larger, its eyes glowing with a feral intelligence that the others lacked. It looked almost human. The creature grinned, sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight as it spoke in a low, guttural voice. "Did you really think you could escape the hunt?" Laura felt a shiver run down her spine as the realization dawned on her. This creature was different, smarter, and it wasn't going to let them go so easily. "What do you think this new creature is? Is it the leader of the pack? Or something even darker? And do you think Laura and her friends will make it out alive? Let us know your theories in the comments." The creature stared at them, its eyes glinting with a dark amusement that seemed almost human. Laura's heart raced as she tightened her grip on the silver pendant, feeling its weight against her chest. This creature was unlike any they'd encountered before. Its movements were deliberate, controlled, as though it were sizing them up, savoring their fear. Without warning, it took a step closer, its gaze shifting between the three friends, lingering on Laura. "I can smell it on you," it murmured, voice deep and chilling. "The courage, the defiance. It won't save you." Laura forced herself to stand tall, though every instinct screamed for her to run. "We're not afraid of you," she lied, her voice trembling. The creature chuckled, a low guttural sound that made her blood run cold. "You should be." It took another step forward, and Laura could see the moonlight glinting off its sharp teeth, its eyes flickering with an unsettling intelligence. "You've trespassed on our land, entered our hunt, and that comes with a price." Jenny clutched Laura's arm, her voice a barely audible whisper. "Laura, what do we do?" Laura glanced around, desperately searching for an escape. The forest loomed behind them, dark and impenetrable, and the town was still too far away. They were trapped. She looked back at the creature, forcing herself to meet its gaze. "What do you want from us?" The creature grinned wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "A deal." It gestured to the silver pendant around her neck. "That trinket, it's bought you a chance. Give it to me, and I'll let one of you go." Laura felt a surge of panic. The pendant was the only thing keeping them safe, the only reason the creature hadn't attacked them yet. If she gave it up, they'd be at its mercy. "Don't do it, Laura," Sam muttered, his voice strained. He was still bleeding, his face pale as he leaned against a tree for support. But Laura felt trapped, her mind racing as she tried to weigh their options. The creature watched her, its gaze unblinking, waiting for her decision. In a moment of desperation, she decided to stall. "And what if I don't make a deal with you?" she asked, her voice stronger than she felt. The creature tilted its head, a dangerous glint in its eyes. "Then the hunt continues, until there's nothing left of you but memories." Laura swallowed hard, her mind whirling. Days passed and life seemed to return to normal. But Laura's sense of unease never faded. She found herself looking over her shoulder, every shadow feeling like it hid a lurking presence, every rustle of leaves sending a chill down her spine. She'd see shapes in her periphery, fleeting glimpses that would vanish the second she turned her head. She tried to tell herself it was just her imagination. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something had followed them back. One evening, as she lay in bed, a sharp knock on her window jolted her awake, her heart pounding. She sat up, clutching her pendant, trying to convince herself it was just a branch tapping against the glass. But the sound came again, more insistent this time. With trembling hands, Laura moved to the window, peering into the darkness outside. Her breath caught as she saw a figure standing just beyond the reach of the porch light, its silhouette familiar yet terrifyingly foreign. It was the creature, watching her, its yellow eyes glinting in the shadows. The creature smiled, baring its sharp teeth, and Laura realized with a chilling certainty